Welcome to the Anatomy of a Strategy podcast. This is Carlos Pacheco.
And I'm Tara Hunt.
And we're here today to talk with Brian Solis.
Brian's a principal analyst and futurist at Altimeter, a profit company, a keynote speaker, and best-selling author.
Brian studies disruptive technology and its impact on business and society.
In his reports, articles, and books, he humanizes technology and its impact on business and society to help executives gain new perspectives and insights.
Brian's research explores digital transformation, customer experience, culture 2.0, the future of industries, trends, and behaviors.
And Brian is also a dear old friend of mine. I have known Brian since back in the quote-unquote Web 2.0 days. I think my first introduction to him was his amazing photographs that he would publish on his blog at the time. I think it was called Bubblicious.
Awesome.
Which really was, talking about what was happening kind of in the tech bubble at the time. It's going to be a really great conversation. Brian had a major transformation over the last little while. Let's just
get to it. Brian, welcome to the show. Most people know you from your multiple books. I think
8 of them or something?
8 of them, right?
Yeah, this is number 8.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Yeah, your keynote presentations, your work with Altimeter Group. I can't talk today. You're a prolific writer, done many appearances. Just in case people don't know you, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are.
Well, my name is Brian Solis, and by day, I am a principal analyst at Altimeter Group. I'm a futurist there, and I study the impacts of disruptive technology on business and markets. And I'm also a digital anthropologist that looks at those same technologies and studies their impact on behaviors and societies. And then I'm also a speaker and an author of now 8 books.
Nice.
So many books. So I've always really wondered how on earth you are able to put out so much great content. And it's probably a little bit of it might be connected to your latest book. I just finished reading Life Scale last night, and I had this, even when I just first picked it up, I had this, oh my God moment, because I could see myself in a lot of the things that you were talking about, especially around like the multitasking and the loss of productivity. I recognize that. I feel like I'm burning myself out half the time. Can you talk about, the journey that you took to writing this book? I know you talk about it in the book, but I think it would be useful to hear it in your own words, because it's such a departure from your day job, from your previous work. I've known you for what? I don't know. It feels like 100 years. I know we're not that old, but like since you were doing Bubblicious back in the day.
Back in the day.
Yeah, and that's very different work. In fact, at that point, I think we were all like, yeah, get online, do it all online, consume everything, post everything. And now there's this big turnaround. I would love to hear this journey that you took in your, I know the book is in your own words, but in your own words here.
Of course. Look, I'll be, super honest. That's not the book I saw myself writing. It's my 8th, but in many ways it feels like my first, because it's a complete departure from everything. The thing about all of this technology, which isn't just, which just didn't start with, mobile and social, it goes back to email and notifications and just the web itself. It was completely transformative, and we started to live this life of real-time notifications, and they started to condition and train us in ways that meant that we were supposed to react to those things in the moment, and they became not just notifications, but literally distractions that we weren't trained to handle or manage, and kind of, for the most part, had to figure out on our own over time of what's the best way to sort of move and react to these things. And so what it ended up becoming sort of at a mass scale is multitasking. We all sort of convinced ourselves that we were these masters of ability to juggle multiple things at once. And sure enough, over time, though, if you study what that does, it it does a lot of things. It reduces your attention span. It reduces your ability to dive deeper on certain things. It sort of kind of moves you along on just checking the boxes rather than creating to greater extents or greater originality. And then ultimately, though, it also starts to affect your insides, your brains, your feelings, your emotions, and at some point, I found myself absolutely affected by all of these distractions, which have essentially mounted on one another with the release of the smartphones and then social media and then apps and real time everything. And we can get into it at a deeper level, but essentially what happened is that we learned to expect regular interruption and distraction, and so our brains and bodies sped up to try to compensate for it.
Well, and I think also, and you might have also been facing this as well, but the expectations of the people around you become instant as well, right? Like I remember, it doesn't feel that long ago, where if somebody wanted to get in touch with me, they would leave a message. And when I got home, I would call them back. But otherwise, I was out and about. I was doing things. But now, it doesn't matter where you are. People can get in touch with you. And if you're not answering a text message right away or picking up your phone and calling somebody back, it seems to be like there's a demand on that too. Did that also affect you?
Oh, that affects all of us, right? I mean, just the pressure and the anxiety that we feel just simply by being plugged in. Maybe it's subconscious for some of us. Maybe it's more at the forefront that we feel this sense of pressure to compete and be on all the time. It adds up. It's not in the most healthy of ways. I mean, how many of us get a text message and we're in a meeting or we're talking to somebody, and then a few minutes later you get a hello ? As if we were supposed to stop
everything we're doing right there. Just stop it all.
Yeah, stop it all. And then the same with emails. I mean, just think about over the years how long would it be before somebody followed up on an email? Maybe a couple of days, a few days, and now it's hours, if that. Did you get my message? And it's this. I kind of lovingly joke, but it's very real that we've all become, in our own way, accidental narcissists. That we literally believe that everything is revolving around us at every time, because every time we use technology, it reminds us that we are at the center of the universe, and so that's creating. So the faster our brains and bodies have to keep up with all of that stuff, right? It directly affects our patience, our expectations, our demands, and so this plays out in ways that are completely upsetting everything. So whether we're as human beings or whether we're customers or what have you, it's that accidental narcissism is a byproduct of how these technologies were designed to intentionally affect and influence our behaviors.
Yeah, on that intentional side of things, some interesting quotes that you have in the book where, you kind of quote whistleblowers from some of the tech companies that outright admit that they design social media or our devices to hook us in.
Ooh, well, you and I know a lot of these people, and we're there at the beginning of, we'll call it the social media era of persuasive design, because a lot of the same techniques are used in gaming. A lot of the same techniques are used in gambling, and a lot of the same techniques are also used in psychological warfare. Yay, let's have a positive conversation.
That's all right. We like going to dark places, so feel free. Just take us there, Brian.
Yeah, I think one of the more famous whistleblowers is Tristan Harris, and he talks about the laws of persuasive design when it comes to social media, the same techniques that went into Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, the like button. All of these things are essentially experiments with manipulating your behaviors so that you feel tied to the platform. And I think I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe they didn't know what the long-term effects of these things were, but what they were designing for was the real-time hooks, which essentially became the real-time addictions to why you consistently pick up your phone, or why you feel like you have to share something, or why you can't stop scrolling through your feed even though it's not adding any kind of value to your life.
Mhm.
And essentially what they were doing was, so I'll give you one of the secrets. For example, when you name your favorite app, there's a millisecond delay that before you see how many notifications you have, and that is designed to create anxiety so that you feel like you win when you see that number, and therefore you want to keep doing that. And that's called variable intermittent rewards, the same sort of baseline that goes into slot machines. And over time, though, what maybe they didn't see, but what ended up happening was that you become that's subconsciously validates your existence, that
Yeah.
you matter, and that you just saw a number that dictates to you how much you matter in the world. And it gives you this sort of measurement that over time conditions you into needing more of that. Because in that
Yeah,
moment, you're
and
not just.
no,
Go
I
ahead.
was just going to add that on my end, I've noticed that platforms are more and more sort of like repeating those notifications, meaning like you don't have real new notifications, but if you access the platform from a desktop, from your iPad or from your phone, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's another notification. It's the same one that you already sort of saw. So I think they're even messing around on that level in terms of like,
Yeah, and I left Facebook. I started leaving it like last year, and I was finding myself feeling better and better. So I kind of just like, I put up a post saying like, okay, I'm not deleting my account or anything, but I'm not going to spend as much time here. And then I realized that a whole bunch of people were trying to contact me through Facebook, and that post had been buried under like people posting to my wall. So I changed my my avatar to say I've left, so that anybody trying to get in touch with me, and I literally logged out of everything that wasn't business. And Facebook started emailing me, about people posting, about liking things, about having conversations. And I had to go into my settings. I think I went in 2 days ago. It was right after I started reading your book, I think, that I first started noticing this. And I had to go in, and it takes forever, but you have to unsubscribe to all of these notification emails that I didn't realize existed, but I think they don't send them until you don't show up on Facebook.
Definitely.
Have you received, are you still on Facebook, Brian, after all this?
Yeah, it's incredible. So a lot of this is actually taught at Stanford by a professor who's very smart and very 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 respected. His name is B.J. Fogg, and so he's come under fire by psychologists. In fact, psychologists are really giving other psychologists a lot of pressure and writing letters to psychological boards that are just basically trying to fight for our children, because these design techniques are not in any way, shape, or form healthy for our kids. In fact, there's a particular startup founder out of Los Angeles, and I'm going to read to you a quote that is just right out of his mouth. We use AI and neuroscience to increase your usage, make apps more persuasive. It's not an accident. It's a conscious design decision. We're designing minds. The biggest tech companies in the world are always trying to figure out how to juice people.
Well, I mean, in a way, they have to, because their survival is really based on user numbers, right? And time on site and all of those things. I mean, they are kind of encouraged. So in a kind of a way, it's like, it's not even fully their fault, or is it?
Well, look, they I think what we had to realize is that our attention is the currency that they buy and sell. The more attention that they have of ours, the more that they can monetize it. So, for example, in a shareholder call last year with Netflix, Reed Hastings was asked about competition, and he joked, but was also truthful, that Netflix's biggest competitor is sleep, and that is just sort of a sign that there's only so much attention that they can buy and sell, and that they do have to figure out how to quote unquote juice people, because that is what's going to allow them to keep people hooked. Now, what I think Tristan Harris was trying to implore was that designers need to be much more ethical in how they think about this, not just for you and me, but for kids, right? Because this is all they know. And I can tell you that in my research, in the year leading up to before I recognized that I was completely distracted and also disrupted, was, for example, in one, I think I tell the story in the book, and I say I think because the book was, I wrote 100,000 words and we ended up with 50,000.
Right.
And I was just so inspired by what I was learning, how to fix this. I spent a year studying the effects of Instagram, Snapchat, you name it, on a woman's definition of beauty and self-beauty, and how those apps affected self-esteem, confidence, and I could tell you that they didn't even realize in the interviews. I interviewed women from age 6 to 61, that a lot of them just had no idea that they were on the treadmill of a lot of this stuff, and that there was a reason why they were subconsciously or deep down unhappy, or that they had self-esteem issues, or that they were constantly trying to ascribe to these standards of false beauty that was perpetuated by their friends and quote unquote influencers who used Facetune to sort of project that image that they had of their, not necessarily that was their real beauty or anything. So it was kind of distorting a lot of things. And women that I had met, for example, had plastic surgery at ridiculously young ages to try to look like their Facetune or their filtered selfie. And so you realize that even though these folks are designing these things to be persuasive, what they did is they unleashed a monster.
Well, they feed into, I think, our some of our worst human traits, right?
And they unlock our worst human traits or they even cultivate worse human traits that we didn't even necessarily know that we had, because we were living life based on, yesteryear's standards of success and happiness and lifestyle metrics and what you're supposed to do and what you're supposed to achieve by when. And then suddenly you got these tools that gave you instant validation and gave you micro fame and audiences and people who were following everything that you were doing, and you felt like this need to be on and create and share every aspect of your life, because that's what the platforms trade on. But what happens is, and what I set out to do was to positively recognize, become aware of all of these things. And then once you have awareness, what do you do with it? How do you take control in a way where you can use all of these things to create a much more positive, productive, and creative life? Because when everybody has access to the same filters and the same capabilities and technologies and enhancements, we all suddenly become incredibly mediocre. We're all the same. And in an era where we actually need more creativity than ever before. And that was my inspiration.
So I'm very guilty of everything you talked about in the book. Multitasking, distraction.
Yes.
Tara knows this very well.
You can't sit in a room.
I've become more and more conscious about it.
Like, put down your phone all the time.
But I do see new technologies coming in to the market, or trying to, insert themselves into the market, thinking about AR, VR, IoT. It feels like it's going to get worse because, right away, we pay attention to the marketing industry, and the marketing industry is turned on by AR right now.
Oh yeah, they're like, let's put like ads and whatever else, like all sorts of addicting things in your cars, in your
And
Google Homes.
and it feels like now, like, we're seeing like the government's starting to pay attention to this, right? And they want to regulate the internet and all that sort of stuff. And it feels like, we're going to fall into the same trap with these technologies.
Yeah. Have you thought about the AR, VR, like all these new technologies and how they could be making this worse or better? Or
Well, the thing, one of the things I didn't share with you, and then I promise it'll get to the answer of your question, is that I was trying to write another book, and I couldn't get past the proposal stage because I couldn't articulate in the way that I had written. I had written previously, and Tara, at the beginning, you had talked about the number of books and how I was creating all this content, but just to be completely honest with you, I was struggling with the previous books. I'd been struggling with all of my research reports and sort of writing at the depth and at the clarity that I used to be able to, at the creativity levels that I used to be able to. But it was okay. Everything was fine. I was just, busy finding every excuse, whatever it was, until I couldn't get past the proposal stage on that last attempt. And that's when I really started to do all of this soul searching, like what. It wasn't just. It turned out that that multitasking wasn't just affecting my work; it was affecting my relationships. It was affecting my presence. It was affecting my presence with how I was with my children. Everything was affected by it, and that I don't think a lot of us realize, just to the extent that we're sort of moving so quickly and being so busy that we're not actually our true best selves in any one moment, because we're just trying to be all of these different ideas of ourselves, and definitely what it is that we project, or what we think we project. So with that, remember the one thing that they all and lastly, one of the things I also recognized was I wasn't as happy as I thought I was. Or I didn't necessarily have this happiness, or the idea of happiness understood. And so, creativity is directly linked to happiness, and those two things are they build upon one another. And why that's important is because allowing ourselves the individuality and the originality to have value, that even just sort of explore any aspect of creativity, whether it's big C creativity like Van Gogh or little C creativity like me coloring in a coloring book. They fire parts of our bodies and our brains that we've since let go to sleep most of the time. And they definitely were taught out of us in school that creativity was for something for elementary school, not for adults. And so when you put all of these things together, we essentially become the prime candidate for all of these technologies and all of these persuasive designs that let us feel better, that give us these semblances of happiness and even semblances of productivity and creativity. And with AI and machine learning and AR and VR and IoT and voice, all of these things are essentially going to further compete for our attention and further manipulate our behaviors. And that is why I think we need to be more conscious and aware of exactly what's happening, so that we can take control and use these technologies in ways that are much more mindful and much more productive and much more assistive in where we are trying to go. And lastly, I'll say why I wrote the book was because I needed it. Because I realized that even with the tools and technologies that I have today, the thing that I was missing was the why. What's it mean to be alive today when we have access to all of these incredible technologies, for better or for worse? We have access to these incredible technologies that are literally changing our world. And I'm being pushed along with it. I'm just being sloshed in this sea of chaos without actually wondering why am I even here? Speaking of distractions, someone's got a call coming in. But the thing that I'll say is that our centers of reference moved. So what we were okay with and what we weren't okay with 10 years ago is really different today, and it's being pushed further and further away without necessarily our permission or our understanding. And so what I needed was actually a journey that wasn't just about technology, but actually much more human, to give me the recentering or the new centering, intentionality to say, this is where I want to be. This is how I want to live my life. These are my values that I am now that I'm awake and aware, what I want to live and ascribe to live to, what my purpose is, what my vision is, and how I'm going to take actions to bring those things around. And then technology becomes an enabler for living a more creative, productive, and happy life. And so we're only going, I guess the now with all of that said, we're only going to be more distracted in the future. So now more than ever, we need to take control to recognize how these technologies are going to add value to us, so that we can live our true best life, and instead of being moved and our actions dictated by those devices.
Yeah, I mean, what I loved about the book is it did seem like your journey, and that I could relate to so much of it. And there's a lot of lists that you have in there that I'm like, okay, I need to actually sit down, take the time, go through it, and do it myself. But one of the things I do worry about is that it does put a lot of the onus on the individual. And I don't know if just knowing what I know of human beings, I don't know if I trust the individuals to fully take that on going into the future. Like for me is also figuring out a way how we get back on track, and what could be done to get beyond just putting the onus on the individual to live that intentional life, when really the rewards that are out there are not for those that take that higher road, right? That take that higher path. The rewards are for those who are performing on social and running that rat race. The rewards are there quite often for the hustlers, right, of online that are performing this, that, and then that, of course, creates more of that vicious cycle. Like, what else? Like, are you working with policymakers? Are you working with the platforms themselves? Like, what else can be? I hate to put you on that spot. Like, solve everything, Brian. But I'm sure, like, you have some sort of clout or power to be working on that side of things as well, right?
Yeah. One of the things that I'm. So there's a lot of things that I'm doing, and there's a lot of things I wish I could be doing. I will tell you this. So right now, I'm working with a company called Two Hat that is really trying to use AI and machine learning in ways that are bringing a bit more of ethics and accountability to social platforms, to get rid of things like hate and bullying and divisiveness, and trying to create a much more productive and less toxic environment for us and our children. That's one fight, because I have a 6 and 3-year-old that I want to know that they are going to be better as a result of their engagement online, and not have to worry about psychological issues that I won't see for years. And even though that's probably going to be the case anyway. And the other thing that I'm doing is creating programs. So I made the intentional decision that I wasn't going to be Mr. Lifescale. So this could be, if you could imagine sort of Tony Robbins embracing the life scale methodology for helping people. You could take this around the country, you could take this around the world, and help people in real life, through workshops and seminars, reclaim their lives and put them on track to be better than they were even before all of these distractions. But I made the decision to be more present with my family. And so what I'm doing is building life scale programs and workshops and materials and certification programs and student materials for life scale for universities and schools, and also life scale for teachers, life scale for life coaches, life scale for corporate facilitators, so that I can scale the power of life scale through other individuals who can essentially help change the world. And so making those materials available to them to do so, that is my big effort right now.
Yeah, I think you talked about that a little bit in the as you came to the end. So there's all sorts of ways in which you could scale yourself without getting back into that same performance grind, because that would be the irony, right? Oh, I
Yeah,
created this
absolutely.
thing. Now I'm, more distracted than ever.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I wanted to live by the life that I can, and I share personally, even though the life scale journey is yours as you go through the book and it asks you to go through the same exercises I went through, I shared the results of my exercises as well, because I wanted to show that we were on this journey together and that I wasn't just writing a book and trying to sell you on any concepts that and I even think I admit at the beginning of the book that I didn't have the answers to what the rest
Yep.
of the pages were going to hold. That I was going to go out, and my promise to the reader was that I was going to figure out what worked and what didn't work, and put it together in a way that only would be on those pages if it was effective in changing my life. And that's why I ended up writing 100,000 words, because I didn't want to stop. I was just
kept
oh
going.
my goodness, I was on fire.
That's a whole other episode where you could talk about how you actually edit it down to almost half, I guess, right, of the original content.
Going back to, what's caused this, do you think that social media ruined everything, or social media was just a symptom?
Oh, well, it was designed to do what it did. I think that's one of the reasons why we got, thankfully, whistleblowers to come forward. So yes, it's part of the problem. The same design techniques, which were well known in darker design circles, are the same techniques that go into things like fake news, for example, and how bots perpetuate that and divide us intentionally. So I think the design techniques were absolutely setting the stage for what happened. I will tell you this, that I'm not in any way intending on getting off of these platforms. Ironically, I need them to help spread a positive message. I am just much more mindful and intentional, and also empathetic in how I use them. I still read my book as a means of staying in control, because it's not a one-time thing. We're being distracted. We're being distracted with new techniques, new algorithms, and new devices every single day. So I guess I know it sounds like an unanswer, but the answer is they were designed to do what they did. It was designed with either short-sightedness or intentionality. I don't know, but when you design something like this, you open up Pandora's box and you reap the rewards or the punishments or the consequences that you deserve. And I think a lot of what's happened to date has been sans consequences, and at the expense of our own livelihoods. Not to get all depressing, but there are horrific stories of just how deep this is affecting people, kids, adults, in ways that would horrify you. So even though we might feel like we're in control, there are people who are not, because when you directly manipulate the chemicals and the emotions within somebody to change their behaviors, it is the same things that substance abuse does to you, and your body starts to crave it and need it and want it, and so it becomes harder and harder to pull out of it. And so I guess the long answer short is they are part of the problem. They are part of the solution. But at the same time, we are in control. We are the masters of our own destiny. So we can either play the victim, or we can take control and be part of the solution.
Agreed.
Yeah. I mean, it's when you're talking, I was thinking of all of the ways in which it's also gone even beyond affecting us psychologically. There's, you could tie the spread of information back to things like Brexit, things like mass murder in Myanmar, the most recent, I don't want to go too dark, but the most recent shootings in New Zealand. So yeah, something has to be done. I'm really hoping that finally, unfortunately we had to go so far, but hopefully there's going to be some really big taking to task. But just to, kind of pull it into maybe a happier place and more of a solution, like even further into the solution-driven place. In the beginning of the book, I think, you talked about like the ways that you get yourself out of that constant cycle, like those sort of things that you need to do. So for anybody listening to this who sees themselves feeling that same stress and anxiety and FOMO, my favorite tip was about focusing on the deep dive stuff and turning off distractions in the morning, because I feel like you, that would be the time that I'm fresh, I'm up, and I'm ready to roll. And then turn on all those distractions like email and social media, et cetera, in the afternoon. But what else can you do to break that cycle? And other than, of course, buying your book and reading it, but also have you learned anything since the book that would be like additional, or some of those 50,000 words that you had to pull out of the book?
The one thing about the book is that I learned a lot from programs that treat addiction, and also programs that aim to treat depression or stages of it. So I say that at the beginning because there isn't one thing. Right, it's a journey, and if you think about how we got to this place, it's not just the fault of the technology. It's also this sort of self-control that we lost or didn't know that we lost along the way. There's usually very personal reasons why we get so far with all of this stuff. So, what I tried to do in the book was help create awareness, but then also at the beginning start to build the capabilities, the regiment that allow us to even get ready for some of the deeper work that comes later in the book. So, there's no point in going through these deep exercises if you can't even focus on them. And the idea was kind of like what you said at the beginning, was we're changing our behavior, small at first and more extensively later as you turn the pages, in ways that are essentially building that skill, building that behavior set. So I'll give you an example. Early in the book, I ask you to learn how to focus for 25-minute bursts, which is what helped me greatly. And the reason why is because if you think about it, every single day, whether you're at work or at home, we get up on the light side of things. On the light side, there are people who are much more extreme than you or me. That on the light side, we get about 200 notifications a day. And every time you get a notification, and if you indulge that notification, it takes you 23 minutes to get back into work at a level of where you were before that distraction. And if you're constantly bombarded by those distractions, then you're constantly floating at a much more superficial level than sort of diving deep. And so what I asked was to get the regimen up to focus for 25 minutes. And I think the first few times I did it, I failed. I think the first time I did it, I lasted for 3 minutes and reached for my phone, not even having a notification. It was just muscle memory.
Right.
Just reached for it. And so that those building blocks that you give yourself allow you to then do and learn more things. The good news is what you were talking about in terms of structuring your day is once you sort of build that skill set, you can last longer, or you can continue just to focus in those bursts, but your body and your mind needs X amount of time to be able to go to deeper levels and unlock that flow, unlock that creativity that is uniquely you. So we're not even living to our full potential right now because we don't allow for it to happen. And that's, I think, what was so powerful in the exercises that I was going through. So just to kind of put a little pretty bow on it, is that the gift you have every single day is that no matter how much you multitask or no matter how busy you are, because you're depleting fuel, you're depleting these resources every single day. If you get a good night's rest, you are actually replenishing everything in a way that allows you, if you give yourself permission to start the next day truly fresh. And it's a choice then, once you are cognizant of how all of this is working and how all of this affects you, how you structure your day, so that you can allow for deeper creativity that is uniquely you, right? Because creativity is defined as ideas that have value, and that you give yourself the space and the depth to focus and create in that time, and then set up your meetings later in the day, do your social later in the day. The world is not going to stop because you couldn't check your Twitter or Insta or Snap feed, and also, the world is not going to stop because you decided to say no to unnecessary 60-minute long meetings. Creativity, that's 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 where your potential is, and that's where your future, your future as it exists today versus your future of tapping into your creativity and your depth are two different things.
Absolutely. I think that is such a inspirational, fantastic place to stop. If you are listening to this and you're like, I am so ready to life scale, where can they find you and the book, Brian?
Well, I hope so, because I can't do this alone. I really can't do this alone, especially with the decision I've made to be more present in my life and my family's life. And so if you want to come along with me on this journey, you could go to any place that books are sold, and also the site is lifescaling.me. We've built LifeScale. It has all of the LifeScale University handles there, so that you could follow positive communities for growth and enrichment and encouragement on all of these platforms. So we're building a community where we're life scaling together and changing the world together.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Brian. We will not take any more of your time today, but we have learned so much and really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Tara, Carlos, thank you.
So, Carlos.
Yes, Tara.
Did you learn anything from LifeScale and from what Brian was saying?
For me, it just sort of put in my face what I was already sort of feeling.
Yeah.
This
for those of you who are out there who are listening to this, who are still listening, Carlos has a bit of a distraction problem, to say the least. I've never seen him sit still for more than probably about 30 seconds without picking up his phone or somehow like responding to notifications. And so this could be a life-changing interview.
Yeah, I don't think we need to get into the reasons, the psychology under that, but right on this episode, we can do another episode on that. Yes, I'm completely conscious of it, and the book has made me just reinforce the fact that I need to think about this stuff and be aware of my surroundings more than I've been over the last couple of years. I thank you, Brian, for helping me this issue.
And yeah, and if you're wondering how this has anything to do with anatomy of a strategy and being more strategic, it's actually intrinsic. It is deeply embedded in strategic thinking, because I think the same level of distractions that Brian refers to in this book personally also tends to plague us externally and in our very short-sighted, short attention span lives as marketers as well. And, for me, I feel like the attention span issue is leading to a loss of that deep dive that Brian is talking about in general, the loss of being able to sit back and observe everything and dive deep and really understand the problem before we tackle it. It's almost like, we want to plan tomorrow. We need to do this now. What are the results 5 days in? Mm-hmm. People don't have the patience anymore. And I think it's all connected to this. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're in a world where all clients, platforms, everything are asking for results within days of launching a campaign, because these platforms have, set themselves up that way, right? And
instant gratification.
Yeah, and we've sort of forgotten that brands don't grow overnight. Advertising or marketing is not an overnight thing. Building somebody's reputation is not overnight. You do not go viral.
Well, you do go viral, but it doesn't necessarily mean what they think it means, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, all of this is to say, it was at first when we reached out to Brian, his vast knowledge on the business transformation side is very deep. But he said, listen, I have this new book. I went out and I bought it as soon as it came out. And when I read it, I realized that it is intrinsically tied to this. It's not such a departure from where he was before. So I think it's really important. But we're going to wrap this up.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with somebody, a friend, a close friend, a colleague who would enjoy it as well. And I don't want to say the word subscribe, so supposedly it's not a good word to say when it comes to podcasts, but add us
follow along.
Yeah, follow along. Add us to your feed, whatever podcast app you're using. We really appreciate it. Yeah. And obviously, if you add a review on Apple Podcasts, that would help us a lot.
Thank you so much.